Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio, and I am thrilled that you have decided to tune in. If you're new to the show, welcome. I would love to hear from you. What are you doing in coffee? What is the dream? What is the journey? How have you found Keys to the Shop? I just want to hear from you. Even if you've been with the show for quite a long time, one of the most thrilling things I get to experience is when I hear people say, I've been listening for quite a long time, years and years, and I, got value from it. And I say this really maybe selfishly, okay, but unapologetically, I love hearing that stuff, only because it helps give me an idea of where we are being helpful, and frankly, it just helps me keep going. So if you want to reach out, you can always do so by emailing chris@keystotheshop.com. And, we do consulting and coaching too through Keys to the Shop. I fly out to coffee shops all the time to do assessments and follow-up coaching. It is a partnership. I even hesitate to use the word consulting because sometimes that can be a dirty word. It may not be that you've experienced consulting in a good way, but I like to work really hands-on with my clients, and we collaborate and we partner together to create momentum and solve problems, refine your business, and find clarity and create profitability where there needs to be more. There's so many different ways I've worked with clients over the last 8.5 years. So if you've been thinking about, maybe I need consulting or coaching, a conversation is the first step here. You can go in the show notes and find the discovery call button and just give me a date, select a date, and we'll talk on a discovery call. Or you can just reach out again, chris@keystotheshop.com, and we'll set up a time, you and me. So that's if you're a large company, small company, just starting out, or lots of experience. We work with all of you who are about people first coffee shops that want to create impact and legacy to make better coffee and serve people well. So anyway, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Arto Brick, at Arto Brick on Instagram, and also our friends at the Pacific Barista Series, pacificfoodservice.com. And we're going to be able to talk about them later in the episode today. But for right now, I want to get to introduce you to, or reintroduce you maybe, to Jon Ferguson. Now, we had Jon on the show a little bit ago. You'll find it in the show notes. We're talking about buying used espresso machines. It was one of our live on the show floor episodes from Keys to the Shop at Coffee Fest. So those of you who listen to that know Jon has a lot of great wisdom to share around coffee machines and coffee tech. So a little bit about Jon, though. He has worked in specialty coffee for nearly 20 years, 2 decades, 1/5 of a century, however you want to spin it. It's a lot of time. And that's with hands-on experience in roasting, green coffee, equipment services, barista training, cafe operation. He has owned and operated both a roasting company and a coffee tech service business. And he's served as a volunteer sensory and technical judge for both regional and national coffee competitions. He was a U.S. Brewers Cup and U.S. Cup Tasters runner-up in 2012, and has participated as an international juror for the Cup of Excellence competitions on several occasions. So he's a regular speaker at industry events, and that's why we talked to him at Coffee Fest, amongst other places. Specialty Coffee Expo is another place, World of Coffee. And he's also contributed greatly in the world of print information, magazines like Barista Magazine, Daily Coffee News, and other places. So what we're talking with Jon about now is that he has a new book. He has a book called Under Pressure, or Coffee Under Pressure, A Guide to Espresso Machine Ownership. So this is his first book. And it's his passion of service work with a deep respect for the effort it takes to keep a machine running smoothly. If you have owned an espresso machine for any time, this is a lot of work. It can be a lot of work. You need to get the right information. This book is chock full of it. Technically, 319 pages worth of breaking down the espresso machine, how it works, also about cleaning, about water, working with your service techs. there's a lot of wisdom here. And so today's conversation pulls from the book to give you some pretty big insights into how you should approach working on and in your espresso machine, and how you should approach working with service techs in your area. You're going to walk away with a lot of great information, but I hope you walk away with the idea that you need to get this book and read it, because it's going to be a really valuable asset, a manual, like it says, to help you keep this espresso machine in prime operating condition. It is such a huge part of your business. You owe it to yourself and your team to treat it right. So that's what Jon's here to help us do. So let's get right to the interview. Here now is our conversation with Jon Ferguson. Jon, welcome back to the show.
How's it going? Yeah.
That's going well. Yeah. Last time we had you on the show, we were at Coffee Fest and we were talking about espresso machines. And this time we've got you back on the show. Full episode, we're talking about espresso machines.
I know. Kind of seems to be like a theme. It's growing.
Yeah, it is kind of like what you do, right?
Yeah, I mean over the last 20 years it's basically I've always had my hand on a portafilter, at one time or another. So yeah. That's basically where I'm at.
Yeah, that's funny. See, as soon as you said that, I was thinking about this trophy that I got from way back in the early years of coffee. That is a portafilter, but it was a portafilter that I used to use on the bar that was kind of broken. And when I got the trophy, I was like, "Oh, this is the filter I used to use like on the weekends at this shop," because I recognized the certain idiosyncrasies of its brokenness.
What kind of weights were you throwing at that point in your filter basket? So 20 grams, 18 grams, 14?
Thank you for asking that. We were doing triple ristrettos, we used to call them, which was, what was it, 21 grams, ounce and a three quarters, ounce and a half volume out in about 35, 38, 39 seconds. Slow pull.
Taking it slow. It's like a slow coffee. Slow, syrupy.
Fudgy.
Yeah.
Yeah, slow syrupy.
Cut
Yeah.
through milk pretty well.
Man, I miss it. I make it at home sometimes, but anyway, old man story. So, Jon, you've written a book called Under Pressure.
Yeah.
Speaking of, extractions, and congrats! It's really amazing. It's a very detailed book. Tell us a little bit about the goal of this book for the person who purchases this. What can they expect?
Wow. Yeah. So I guess I've been almost working on it for about 2 years now. At least the concept, the idea of like writing everything down that I could think of about espresso machines, that in the service industry that is surrounding the espresso machine itself, and the maintenance and the care and all of these gaps, not only in my knowledge, but what I see when I visit cafes, and what's being done, what's not being done, or what's being done incorrectly, or all of these misconceptions about, well, it must be the way that you're tamping, or it must be the coffee or the roast. But sometimes it's the espresso machine. It's not quite dialed in properly. Maybe the flow rate's off. Maybe it hasn't been cleaned in a while. A lot of the times I remove a little screen and I see that it's all plugged up with, oils. So, that was the problem. And they were trying to identify everything else except for the espresso machine. I think I don't know if there was any other book that was written about espresso machine maintenance and care, except for all of the owner's manuals that come with espresso machines. And that's probably some of the most boring reading that you can sign yourself up for. Although it's probably the most important reading to do when you have an espresso machine. So I guess the goal here was to make reading an owner's manual fun. But I don't know if the book that I wrote is actually fun to read, but it is definitely kind of dense and thick with information, and coming from a couple of years of hands-on experience out in the field, but also as a barista, as a roaster, as a green coffee buyer, coffee professional, over 20 years, and all of the people that I've surrounded myself with in the industry, brilliant minds, really, really talented people, service techs that had so much knowledge that I don't think was 100% translating to coffee shop owners sometimes. Maybe there was a disconnect So I thought maybe if there was a book that was approachable and practical that could help service technicians and just cafe owners or people who own espresso machines to better understand the tools that they're using every day to make the coffee that they love so much. So yeah, I guess that was the intention, but also it's about professional development. It's espresso machines are very complex, very technical for me. I have to admit that I nearly failed chemistry in high school, and I did not go to college to become an engineer. So I struggle with that academic side of things. So this was a way for me to basically learn as much as I can, and I'm really good at writing things down, and that's kind of how I learn, is just write it down and organize it. So
What's the benefit for the reader to be listening to somebody who's, by just the very fact that it needs to be understandable to you, how many owners have just a brilliant chemistry background or engineering background, and really desire for the most technical of inside baseball jargon around the composition and the makeups of amalgams and that kind of stuff. We're not really looking for that so much, because the owner of an espresso machine is also usually an owner of a coffee shop. When it comes to a coffee business, there's more to focus on than the espresso machine. So if you're giving people information about something that's complex, I mean, it seems like, well, I'm going to totally butcher the Einstein idea of being able to simply relate complex ideas is kind of a sign that you understand it. So I'm glad that you don't have that background, because I think that constraint probably helped in the writing of this,
yeah,
yeah, complex book, but in simple ways that people who don't have the time to be experts can gain understanding.
I hope that it is read and it is understood by those who are not engineers or trained in chemistry or whatnot. But I actually, I do think that there are a lot of coffee shop owners that are skilled engineers and also brilliant minds. But at the same time, that's they do have other things to do, and espresso machines work in unique ways. They have very niche components, also very universal components that are used in plumbing and electrical. So this book kind of, or at least kind of reviewing the anatomy of espresso machines, like what's a filter basket? Like they might not use that in another type of field, or as an electrician, they might use these types of systems a little different applications. So there's some value there too. But as a coffee shop owner, I kind of see this being as a reference book, sitting behind the counter when the manager might have some time to kind of spend reading up on preventive maintenance. What does that mean? What are we doing? What could we be doing better? What are we not doing? Things like that. So, and that's the discussion that is going on in the book. So I think it's very approachable. I can read it. That's one good sign.
That's I can read it. You can read it. It's readable. And so let me ask you this: responsibility when it comes to the espresso machine, and whose responsibility is what. There's techs and there's owners. What do most owners of espresso machines neglect that need to be their realm, their sphere of responsibility, for like the internal responsibility of a coffee shop, that's reasonable for an espresso machine?
I think it's I'm a quick analogy with cars, because if you buy a car, you probably know that you need to change the oil every once in a while, maybe 3,000 miles or every 3 months, or whatever the owner's manual specifies for that type of car or vehicle that you have. And that kind of goes with espresso machines too. And I think that maybe that doesn't translate all the time. I know a lot of coffee shop owners are just like, hey, set it up and come back for PM and just tell me what to do and I'll do it. That's a wonderful approach, working with your service tech to say, please help. What do I need to do to make sure that this espresso machine is running properly? But sometimes that management strategy or that passion for keeping your espresso machine is not clean, or it's not so prevalent. So I think that there are two things that no matter what kind of approach you take to your espresso machine, understanding that water and is nearly 95% of your espresso beverage, and water can destroy an espresso machine, the components inside, and also like alter the flavor quite a bit. So I think the one thing that owners should really look at is, yes, the machine, but also the water that is feeding into the machine that's making your beverage. That's probably my number one recommendation, is to find a good service technician or water quality specialist that can help set up a filtration and conditioning system that's right for your espresso machine and your location. And then I have a long list of other things.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and as anyone would guess, when we touch on these subjects, and we'll say this as we go forward, is get into this topic with our conversation, but dive into it by getting the book, by reading what is written about this. What is it? 319 pages of information here about the topics we're going to be covering.
Technically, and that includes the index. So I mean, I was kind of debating 319, but that's what the vendor says it is. So I'll just go with that.
Vendor. Yeah, let's go by the vendor. I think when we talk about water quality, it's also, I think, needs to be said that if you think about national, because we have a tendency to look at what the SCA says we need for our coffee, we need this, that, or the other thing, or national standards. But you've seen it and I've seen it in different parts of the United States or different parts of your country, wherever you're listening. The municipal water supply is going to be different out of the tap, and is going to require different types of conditioning, different types of filtration. And I suppose you would recommend testing the water to see what do you actually need versus just blindly applying a standard that you found online that applies to some unhelpfully broad base of coffee companies.
Yeah, I think that one thing I just want to kind of put out there now, maybe I should have done it earlier, is that there's one page that needs to be read in this book, and it's the disclaimer page. It's very long, it's very tedious, but please read it, because it's important to understand that, like, this is for educational purposes only. It's all in that page. So please read that. So anything that I suggest, it is just for educational purposes, and I'm not endorsing anyone, but my number one recommendation is always call your manufacturer first and ask them that question. What kind of water filtration system should I have? Or what precautions, what actions should I take to set up this espresso machine? If they're not immediately available, call a service technician. If they're not immediately available, it is very, very good to call a water specialist. Even just it's probably generally not recommended to hook up your espresso machine before you know what kind of water you're putting into it. So yes, testing your water is extremely important. How you do it, we kind of go with that. I don't want to deflect the conversation, but it's somewhat addressed in the book. There are better ways of doing it than others, but the best thing you can do is to call support from a specialist to do that properly.
I'll say also, the idea of what goes through the mind of a operator oftentimes is, if water itself had a mind, if it was sentient, and it still did the path of least resistance thing that it does in a portafilter way, this is what we do also. And I look at it financially when people say, well, what's the cheapest solution for this? Or what can I get away with? There are certain things that you would probably be better off getting away with in the coffee shop. Filtration's not one of them. If you can have the appropriate and best water is as important as, maybe I'm overstating it, the espresso machine itself. So instead of getting into this mindset of how we can sort of nickel and dime ourselves into, problems down the road, feels like, just budget for some really good filtration. Expensive doesn't mean appropriate, though, right? You just need the right one.
Yeah, so I love talking about this. It's about, I think that, nickel dime, what can I get away with? I translate that to efficiency, sort of like, I want the most value out of the dollar that I spend. How can I get that? What's the long-term impact on the espresso machine if I use proper water that it was recommended by the manufacturer? And, how can I be efficient with my water filtration system? And, one general recommendation, again, always refer to your manual, but having a flow meter, there are tools and there's components in place within a water filtration system. When the water goes in, it's going to be filtered, conditioned, whatever. When the water comes out, it might go to more than 1 or 2 units. But really knowing when that system is exhausted or needs management attention or replacement is really important, because throughout the year you're going to have different seasonal usage of your espresso machine. You might get really busy for a month or two, then you might have some downtime. Just like a car, you might have only, let's say, driven that car 1,000 miles and it's only been 2 months, or maybe it's been 3 months. I'm sorry, that analogy just kind of went south. But you could be changing your filtration system faster than you need to. It might have a longer capacity rating than what you're using. Having a flow meter will actually give you an understanding of how much water you're using. So perhaps maybe instead of saying they recommend 6 months or so many gallons going through it, having a flow meter will help you with those measurements. Now, sometimes there are filters that, no matter how much mileage you put on them, after a certain period of time, they do need to be replaced because of some of the breakdown components inside of the filters that just need to be changed. So yeah, and also, like I said, having more complex water filtration systems are also not always better. Having one cartridge may do the job; it may not do the job. Yeah, I think, and also like I like to do with a lot of things in the industry is, maybe get 2 or 3 different opinions. The first one being your manufacturer, of course. It's not really an opinion; it's a statement of fact. And then go from there, look at different water filter companies and see what they recommend, what kind of expertise they have in beverage service, specifically coffee and espresso. Are they familiar with the parameters that you're giving them? They probably are. So, but it's always good to kind of ask around and make a couple bids.
Well, John, this leads us into a question, I think, about in the internal components. Water is coursing through the machine, but there are internal components that, if we get handy, let's say somebody just, goes after this book and they get really knowledgeable and they just want to do all this work themselves. And they're like, you know what? I don't want parts that are just ordered from the manufacturer. I could go to Lowe's, I can go to Home Depot, I can go to my hardware store and get this stuff. Why wouldn't you recommend doing that? What's the difference between off the shelf parts and the appropriate commercial grade parts for an espresso machine?
Absolutely, that's a great question. The first thing is, this book should not be used in any way, shape, or form as a do-it-yourself repair manual or how to repair anything. Again, another nice disclaimer is, like, if there's a panel, it's probably not supposed to be taken off and be worked with, even with people who are handy, because water and electricity can really hurt somebody. I've been a victim to that, and I understand it firsthand that it can be dangerous, very dangerous. So even before you even go to the hardware store, you should probably just call a service technician. And this is commercial equipment. This is very, not necessarily complicated, to work on per se, but you're in a commercial environment, so there's a lot of risk involved, going beyond, well, not only yourself but others, and also the establishment. So there's a lot of weight that comes with that. So very, very highly recommend calling a service technician or the manufacturer to see how you might be able to do something, but first get authorization to do it. Going to a hardware store is probably, it's not recommended in any way, shape, or form, specifically just because of the materials in which some of those things are made out of, right? For example, you have the dispersion plate and the screw that holds the dispersion plate up in the group head. That screw is typically resistant to water, like stainless steel and whatnot. Maybe if you go to the hardware store, you find something that kind of threads just about right, and maybe it's the right thread depth, but maybe it's not. Maybe you overlooked the fact that it wasn't stainless steel. So you start using it and it starts to rust out, and then it damaged your machine. That's one example. And then also drain hose. Drain hoses, if they're not made out of durable material, they could pinch, very simple, and then create backflow and spills everywhere. Quite a bit of mess. So one other thing is, even if you go online and you do get really handy and you're pretty good with safety, and you've taken all the precautions, and you think you're good at maybe replacing a safety valve on a boiler, and you buy one and you put it on the boiler and it fits perfectly, and then you realize later on that it wasn't rated at the right pressure for that boiler. Let's say it was a 1.5 and you needed to get a 2.0 bar. So that can cause a lot of issues and a lot of problems. not only with safety, but with functionality of the machine. So yeah, call somebody help.
It's the idea of your book's title, right? Things are under pressure, and we have such an incredible amount of usage of these components. And the manufacturers are not stupid. I mean, they make the machine to work the way it works with the things that they've chosen for a very specific reason. Unless you're buying your espresso machine out of a Kmart parking lot, and then who knows? You know, it's just
I mean, even then, it's, someone made it somehow, and plastic or not, then there's a certain type of plastic. But no, I think it's really important just to kind of, if you, this is a commercial environment. Unless you're, at home and at your own risk and you're doing your own thing and you're really handy at stuff. It's that's your thing. But yeah, in general, you should really stay away from anything that's not authorized by the manufacturer.
Hey everyone, it's Chris. We'll be right back to our conversation with Jon Ferguson on espresso machine maintenance. But I wanted to talk to you first about Arto Brick and then about the Pacific Barista Series. Arto.com, or especially important for you to follow them on Instagram at Arto Brick. Reach out to Armin, who is the owner there, along with his brother Vod. They run this company in LA. Bricks and tiles and stonework made, produced and made, distributed, designed in LA. They work with coffee companies all the time to help them develop a whatever you can dream up. If you dreamed up, I want a tile wall or a stone arranged in this way, and I want it to look that way, they can make your dreams happen. They have the tools, they have the ability to create what you have in your brain about the feel of this stonework or this tile wall or whatever it is. So reach out to them if you're in this building process. Include their tile and stonework in your project at Arto Brick on Instagram. So we're also sponsored today by our friends at the Pacific Barista Series. This is the line of plant-based performance beverages that is preferred by baristas around the world because it was created for baristas and tested by baristas around the world and proven to be effective in standing up to the heat from steaming. It actually gives great texture for the drink, and it creates balance in the cup. So the finished product is not only got this great texture, it is preserved the integrity of the liquid, right? But the taste is still focused on the coffee. So you're not getting overwhelmed by whatever the plant-based beverage choice you made is. It's harmonious. So that's all on purpose because they care about the end user experience and the professional making it for the customer. So check them out at pacificfoodservice.com. Get samples, try it for yourself. And, I think if you're looking for the best plant-based beverage for your customers, the Barista Series is something you should definitely check out. What I will say also for a lot of people out there, and I tell my clients this all the time, we had Terry Zinowich on a long time ago. I love Terry, formerly of Espresso Parts, now Coffee Works or Cafe Works in Pacific Northwest somewhere. I don't even know where he is now. But baskets, gaskets, screens, and screws, replacing the screens and screws throughout the shift. Very good to be, maintaining your machine that way, and all the preventative maintenance that gets talked about. People can it's kind of like going to your dentist and they say, hey, you should be doing these things. You're like, yeah, well, I should be doing these things. But really, you should. And it's not only important, it's critical. Have backups, have things that are duplicates. I wouldn't recommend it per se for things like grinding burrs. I mean, if you can afford it, sure. But there was this one time I was like, we're going to order duplicates of the Melkunig burrs. Yeah, and the company was just like, what did you order that cost that much money? And I felt so bad. I was like, man, I should have checked with like budgeting and stuff because it's not very cheap to do that. But with the other stuff, screws, washers, probes, and stuff like that. But your tech probably has all that stuff anyway.
Yeah, and they're probably authorized to do it, especially if you're removing a panel. So yeah, I think a lot of the things that to keep up on would be to ensure that like you communicate with the service technician or the whoever's kind of working with your machines to to just keep notes and say, oh, the last time that they were here, they replaced the boiler safety valve, they the vacuum breaker, and it just tried to start to develop a rapport with the service technician, make it a regular visit, and just kind of keep up on the preventative maintenance plan, basically, that comes along with all of these parts that are recommended by the manufacturer, replaced at certain intervals, whether that be like, time meter or condition based, usage.
So there's a lot of internal physical components, but and yeah, I used to work on this old 1972 FIEMA with like a paddle actuator. Yeah, like very fun, very beast. Got to let it bleed for like a minute before it stops boiling the water through the group head. But today, you're driving like it's like driving a car. There's everything is digital. There's so many digital components and programming capabilities in espresso machines now that we're not just talking about screws and internal metal, plastic components. We're talking about software. And in the book, you talk about levels of programming that you would recommend. There's sort of like managerial, there's service tech, and so forth. So, why are you, or can you talk about the levels of programming and why you break them down the way you do?
Well, I think it was sort of an approach, just again for my own, not only like repetition of learning, of understanding like how programming is typically presented, by the manufacturer in the owner's manual, right? Like they basically kind of, it's not universal. All machines are different in this aspect, but a lot of them kind of like follow this, access to barista, access to manager, access to service technician, access to manufacturer, and they all have different roles and different responsibilities that kind of are kind of locked into those types of programming. And that's important because if you are a barista and you accidentally push a button, or you're trying to change the dough, something that you have access to and that you do on a day-to-day basis, and you accidentally, let's say if they didn't have the programming levels and if they weren't under password protection, you could really mess up the machine, to put it simple. So, and I think that alleviating that pressure from the barista by saying, I actually don't want access to that programming because that's a responsibility I don't want to have on my shoulders. With the manager too, it's sort of like, well, you do have some responsibilities. You can have some responsibilities by looking at the different cycle counts and usage and all the other type of valuable information there for management. And then there's the service technicians where, again, it's password protected, that they can understand, different temperature changes and whatnot. And then there's the manufacturer access, where they typically look at like firmware or working with a technician to kind of like dive into some of the deeper issues, calibrations and whatnot.
So, with your different access points, if you've got something accessible to the baristas, it's designed to be quickly adjusted. If it's something that you've trained your baristas to do, first of all, not everything that's, the manufacturer says, well, we want the baristas to be able to do this. If you're the kind of company that trains your baristas to do it, by the way, not every group of baristas is adequately trained to even access the stuff that is accessible to baristas from the manufacturer. So you as the owner can't, I don't think, as this is just a caveat, rely on something being made accessible doesn't mean that it's something that the manufacturer is going to be responsible for having trained your staff to use. You still have to do that part and give the parameters of how much to, adjust it. Because I imagine even in the accessible categories of the software, you can still mess things up, if not just for the quality of the coffee, but for the machine.
Yeah, I mean, most of us who have been around an espresso machine and looked at an owner's manual, and you look at the programming section, you see these huge diagrams, these huge maps of like, you do this, you go here, and then it's like, and then you have to push up and down, left, right, and it's like, what button do I push? And then you're just kind of like, I don't even want to do this. Forget it. I'm not even going to use that feature because it's too hard to learn. That's true. It could be quickly frustrating. Nothing better than having a person that, let's say, is maybe that person that's sold the espresso machine to you, that might be a service technician that has some training and some authorization, can sit down and maybe take an hour out of their time with you to maybe train and help find a way to train not only maybe the manager, but maybe one or two employees at the same time. So that way that information can be passed down to the other baristas. And just you maybe take an hour out of your time to just look at the programming and let it soak in and, work with the machine to, make that a priority, because there's a lot of features that I see, like let's say the cleaning cycle on an espresso machine, just push two buttons, hold it, and all of a sudden it goes into this cleaning cycle. Some people don't know that feature exists, and that's unfortunate because it's an easy push of two buttons. So
My last question, Jon, I think is about working with service techs. We've mentioned it many times. This is an inevitability. It's not just an inevitability. I don't want to put it that way. It's a great thing that we have so many techs that we can work with. Now, working with them knowledgeably is not always, something that an owner does. It's there's nurturing of relationships that we have to have with service providers, just like our, people who give us our, bread or pastries and other things. This is obviously a lot more consequential to the business in some ways, arguably. So how would you recommend, at least in the couple of minutes we have left here, people start to really approach this working with service techs?
yeah, if you're it doesn't really matter if you're new or not. Like if you just open up a coffee shop, you have a new espresso machine, and you haven't developed a relationship with a service technician already, yeah, I think getting to know them personally, walking in, or if you're lucky enough to have a service technician or a company that's close by that you can go visit, walk in and really get to know them, and let them know what kind of equipment you have, and just be very personable. And hopefully they return that in kind, and you develop a really good relationship that's, from the base up, very understanding, right? Like the more communication you have with them up front, before you have an emergency, the better it's going to be. If you just call anybody up out in the middle of nowhere and say, hey, I have an emergency, they don't know who you are. They don't know where you're located. They don't know what kind of equipment you have. You say it's leaking. Okay, where is it leaking? How's it leaking? And at the same time, that dispatcher that answered the phone, they might be juggling two or three other emergencies and trying to be very nice. And it's a hard job. I think on both ends of that spectrum, it's a hard job when your cafe goes down and you can't make drinks, and it's equally stressful as a dispatcher to do that. And it's, albeit, their job to be able to be trained for that type of emergency situation and communication. But yeah, I've suggestions for coffee shop owners when they do want to develop a better relationship or have an emergency is be as detailed as you possibly can. I think in the situation, like if it's leaking, where's it leaking? What kind of sounds is it making? Being calm, being clear. If you have the ability to safely take a picture or a video or something safely, and you can maintain a certain distance, don't hurt yourself, but maybe that could be helpful too. The more information and the more communication you have, the better. Yeah.
That's good. I like the safety part. I've done some pretty stupid things in my career. We shouldn't be precariously perching things inside things. Don't lower your cell phone on video mode into the espresso machine with a thread. Like it's probably not great.
Well, yeah, I've seen some I've seen some things where I'm like, that's okay. I don't need a video. No, don't try that. No, don't do that. Don't do that.
Just get a couple more inches in there.
That's okay. You don't. Yeah, you don't have to do that. Don't. There's no reason for any type of risk or anything. Keep a safe distance at all time from anything that's questionable. But also one thing is also, like, if you're a coffee shop owner, like I used to be at one point, and sometimes I wouldn't want to be fully disclosure, like maybe we don't backflush every night, or maybe we don't backflush 3 times a day, or maybe we had a slow day and we forgot last night, and those things kind of, you don't want to tell your service technician or your dentist that you don't floss, right? Sometimes you're just going to admittedly say, I don't floss, but I know you tell me every time I come in. And they're going to tell you that you don't floss anyway. I mean, that's what they tell me. And I'm like, okay, I'm trying better. I'm trying. So yeah, it's something that don't try to hide the mistakes. The more they know, the better. And they can help you work through those situations. And I started to floss more. Yeah, I got a lot of floss.
Yeah. Well, I think the next step here, of course, is getting the book. Thank you for spending time here today. Tell us how we can go get that book.
Yeah, so if you go on Amazon or Barnes & Noble online, just search for Coffee Under Pressure, a Guide to Espresso Machine Ownership by Jon Ferguson. And that's the best way to get it. And thank you for having me, Chris. It's always great to see you.
Well, everybody, I hope that you enjoyed that conversation with Jon. As you can see, there's a lot to this, and he's already shared some really helpful stuff, talking about the integrity of what goes into the machine, the fixes and approach you should have to training your staff and what they should be fixing or you should be fixing, and how to work with service techs. There's a lot in this book that is going to equip you for success. So I would tell you, go and check out the Instagram account at Coffee Under Pressure. You can get the book on Amazon, Coffee Under Pressure. You can get it at Barnes and Nobles. Jon's going to be speaking at Coffee Fest Orlando. So if you want to check that out, go ahead and go to coffeefest.com and check out his speaker bio and where he's speaking. So check out those channels of Barnes and Nobles and Amazon to buy this book. And a huge thank you to Jon for joining us on this episode and really enlightening us with just a little taste of what's in this book to help us use the espresso machine we have to the best of our ability to make great coffee. That's what we're all about here, right? So if you have any questions, comments, or feedback about this episode or any episode, email Chris at keystotheshop.com. If you're interested in coaching and consulting for your coffee shop or your coffee shops, you have special projects. We work with people to do short-term or long-term projects, things that are very involved or very short-term, and it's fine. I did a short-term project recently to help a coffee company that's been established for quite a long time redo their mission, vision, and values. And we had a really great time doing that. Super fun and very effective. I was really pleased with the results. So there's lots of different ways we can work together. So reach out, Chris at keystotheshop.com. And with that, I'll say goodbye, everybody. Thank you so much. Get this book and go make some tasty coffee. Take care of your machines and take care of each other. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.